this is a world that I don't know that much of. I mean, I've been so much at the periphery of mainstream science in some ways. I mean, I had an NSF grant when I finished my work in mathematics, but intelligent design remains controversial stuff, so I don't know just what all is going on with the funding possibilities with origin of life. It seems to me, though, that what's really fundamentally at stake is that you can get these basic constituents of life pretty easily by purely material means, but then it is a matter of organizing these constituents into functional, biologically meaningful wholes, and that's what just has resisted scientific explanation. I mean, and so it's because you're looking for these undirected material means to do that. And it seems to me that, in fact, the way things tend to go is that you're trying to use, insofar as you're getting biological complexity at that level, you're co-opting existing biological systems, or you're introducing engineering into the material structures. So what am I saying? I think we're dealing with a very, very hard problem. And I wonder if at some level the funders realize that this is just an ineffective use of funds.
They like to define the rules after they've calculated the probabilities. And that's not how science works. The way science works is you come up with a hypothesis, you come up with some sort of statement beforehand. You work with those assumptions, and then you work with the evidence and see what it supports. They like to run all the numbers, find their ridiculous probabilities, and then draw their conclusions and state their questions after the fact. The fact still lingers that what's the probability that if I take a deck of cards and I throw it on the ground, what's the probability that the deck of cards will land in that certain arrangement on the ground, that gigantic messy pile? Well, the probability of those cards landing in those exact orientations with the exact up and down, everything spread out, is essentially zero. If you take a trillion decks of cards and throw them at the ground again, you're probably never going to hit that same exact arrangement again. So the probability of those cards landing in that arrangement when I throw them on the ground is essentially zero. But they did. What happens is you're looking at the probability after the fact.
Right. It seems like, especially with biology and whatnot, it seems like they're taking it from the top down, and they're saying to get to this point, the probability is zero that this would ever happen. When, I mean, if you look at it, something had to happen, some sort of design had to happen, and they're looking at it from the top down and saying, look how complex this is and look how wonderful this is. That could have never happened randomly, by random chance.
Right. They also like to say, look at this bacteria. There's no way this bacteria or the single cell could have come together by chance. And that's really a straw man, because no one is saying that the first life was that complicated. No one is saying that the first life was just pop, oh, there's a single cell out of nowhere. You know, the leading theories on how life formed is in very gradual steps from just simple chemical replicators on up from there. And at each step, going from one to the next is extremely probable. Or even if it's unprobable, you will then have the large, vast ocean with large amounts of time. So they like to just throw out nonsense, non sequiturs, and hope that they can distract people long enough to get them to come over to their side. Because once you're embedded on that side, it's kind of hard to break loose. It took me until I was like 20.
So did you grow up in a religious household?
Yes, extremely religious household. Until I was about 18, I thought the Earth was 6,000 years old. So 6,000 to 10,000 years old. Dinosaurs were on the Ark, all that good stuff. And it took me coming to school and getting an education and getting away from the influence of religious parents to finally shed that. It's a good time.
One of the most compelling arguments that one can make for the teaching of creationism or intelligent design or so-called alternate theories in the classroom along with evolution is the idea of fairness. If you're going to hear one side of the story, it only seems fair to hear the other side of the story. And I think most Americans, for most Americans, that argument resonates. It sounds just great. You want to hear both sides of an issue. Now, the reason this doesn't apply in science is actually pretty straightforward. It's not a question of hearing both sides of an issue. It's a question of whether or not the scientific process is going to be allowed to work. So ask yourself, How do scientific theories, how do ideas and concepts get into a curriculum or into a textbook? The answer is these ideas originate in the minds of scientists. They propose them, they do research, they develop evidence. They engage in peer review, which means they publish their findings, they argue with people with whom they disagree, they produce new evidence to answer those arguments, and gradually over time, if the evidence is on their side, they will win a consensus within the scientific community that their ideas are right, or at least that they're valuable and they have something to offer scientific discourse. And when they do that, quite automatically, those ideas will end up in classroom and in textbook and curriculum. The proponents of intelligent design, or creationism, who say it's only fair to consider their ideas, have a very curious idea of what fairness is, because they're not interested in developing evidence. They're not interested in engaging in this process of peer review, of publishing their work, of going to scientific meetings and trying to win a scientific consensus. In effect, what they want to do is to do an end run around the entire scientific process by appealing to boards of education or legislatures to insert their ideas into the classroom, even though they haven't won a scientific consensus. So you have to ask yourself, what's fair about that? That every other idea in science has to fight its way through the criticism and analysis of the scientific process, but these ideas claim that they want to be exempt from that process in the name of fairness. In reality, what they're asking people to do is to cheat on the process of science and give them a shortcut that will get into classroom and textbook. That would be very bad science policy, and it'd be even worse in terms of educational policy.
Mathematics is really just sort of a game that we play on paper with pencils, sort of like tic-tac-toe, but just a lot more complicated. And in fact, it models the real world, just like another game like Monopoly models the real world. It's just math does it a lot better than the other sciences do.
So do you think that the disconnect from the real world kind of makes people gravitate towards it who would be more pro-religion than other people?
I think that is partly the case. Yeah, people who want to continue believing the way they believe are, I think, more likely to be interested in a math or a physics than they would be in biology, because they know that in a biology class they're going to have to learn about evolution and they're going to have to regurgitate all those facts, which are true facts, but they don't want to. So math allows them not to. One other thing about doing math, I think, is especially if you don't really understand that it's a game, is that you can very easily think that it's sort of this magical, sort of almost spiritual type of thing. Numinous, I think, is the best word to describe it. As you're proving something, you find out that this really complicated math system is actually really simple. You can, you sort of get to this point and everything sort of just becomes clear suddenly. And it would be easy to mistake that for being some super elegant, beautiful design by somebody who designed it before you ever even thought about it. Because maybe it's something that you've done for the first time ever. Nobody's ever done this math, and suddenly it's just this beautiful thing, and you think, well, if this turned out this way, it must be because somebody planned it to work this way. But it's just not really the case. The structures that we've designed to do math in sometimes have these really beautiful, elegant solutions. Sometimes they don't. And when you find the beautiful one, you think, oh, this is beautiful, this is proof of God or something. But when you find the ones that aren't beautiful, aren't elegant, you don't find the solution, then you don't think, oh man, there's clearly no God. If there was a God, he would have made this work out.
Right.
So you sort of remember the hits and you forget the misses.
Right. That's a big thing in biology too, is the more biology-prone creationists like to bring up how perfect the human body is, or how perfect this animal is, or how it works.
They forget the testicles around the outside.
Exactly.
Horrible.
They forget all the horrible designs. It's like the only wonderful thing about the human body is that it works at all.
I like my
terrible.
brain. That's about it. I wish the skull's a bit bigger and a little better padding.
It's sort of strange that they put the recreation area right next to the waste management area.
Exactly.
It's sort of a bad choice.
Get the gospel into the hands of this generation, the hands of future doctors, lawyers, and politicians. Remember, this is America. It's still the land of the free. the home of the brave, and this is a life and death issue.